Well, countries like Japan and China and Denmark have already introduced vaccine passports. And the point of a passport is to force people to take the coronavirus vaccine. And if they don't, they can't live a normal life. It'd be hard to imagine a better way to discourage people from taking the vaccine. If you wanted to scare the hell out of people about vaccines, you would do something like this. If you wanted them to take it, you would brag about how great the vaccine is, and you would show that it is. But yesterday, the White House announced its own plans of a sort for vaccine passports. Private businesses will handle it if they want to reopen.
A determination or development of a vaccine passport, or whatever you want to call it, will be driven by the private sector.
Glenn Greenwald is an independent journalist. He's on Substack, as many of you already know, and he joins us tonight. Glenn, thanks so much for coming on. I know you're in favor of vaccines. I think of myself as pretty pro-vaccine myself. This seems almost designed to scare people on the subject of vaccines and make them feel coerced, or maybe it'll work. What do you make of this?
Well, I think you have to start with noting how draconian of a invasion this is in three different ways. Number one, coercing citizens to put a substance into their body that they don't want in their body, a pretty grave invasion of bodily autonomy, one of the most fundamental rights we have. Secondly, gathering a new database that can track people in terms of their health, that can easily be expanded, as government programs often do, into a whole variety of other uses. And then thirdly, restricting people's movement. Freedom of movement is one of the most fundamental rights we have. It's actually guaranteed in the Constitution. Now, I'm not saying there's never a scenario where you can imagine that maybe vaccine passports wouldn't be justified if it were really a health catastrophe. But why are we even talking about it right now when the problem isn't insufficient people wanting the vaccine? The problem is there's not enough vaccines for the people who do want them. And then at some point soon, we're going to reach herd immunity because enough people, polls show, want the vaccine, such that the people who are unvaccinated don't pose a threat to the society or anybody else. So why is it necessary to stigmatize them and create a caste system? And as you say, the American culture is such that when the government tells you to do something, there's a tendency not to want to do it. So it seems to me driven by things other than science and health concerns.
Are you comfortable with the idea of massive multinational monopolies having your health information and passing it between one another?
I've spent the last 10 years of my work, Tucker, as a journalist, as you know, reporting on the grave dangers of what happens when the state collects information. They always promise that it's going to be temporary, that it's just for a specific problem. When they enacted the Patriot Act in 2001, they said, don't worry, it's just going to be 3 or 4 years, and then it's going to be done once we get the problem of terrorism solved. Here we are 20 years later. Nobody thinks about eliminating the Patriot Act anymore, and it grew well beyond its original intention. Yes. That's one of the things that always happens. And I think there's a huge cultural strain here that liberals have this kind of punitive strain in their politics, that they like the idea of being able to stigmatize people who don't agree with them on vaccines by creating a second-class citizenry for them. I think that's a big part of the motive.
You just reminded me once again that I idiotically supported the Patriot Act, and I just want to apologize again to the country for doing that. Do you think there's, really quickly, do you think there's any way out of this? You'd hate to see a scenario where people are vaccine resistors, but maybe we're moving toward that.
Well, I think that what we've always heard is herd immunity is the promised land. And if we can demonstrate, as I think is already being demonstrated, that enough people want to take it, it'll kick the legs out of the rationale for doing this.
Yes, and I certainly hope we get there before we get to coercion. Glenn Greenwald, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Tucker.